In an international standoff that's gripping two nations, Zambia and South Africa are now locked in a legal war over the late President Edgar Lungu's body. The Lungu family refuses to back down, while South African courts prepare for a verdict that could shake the entire region. What happens on August 4th could rewrite history. Will Zambia regain its right to bury its former leader? Or will South Africa set a precedent no one saw coming? Stay tuned, because this is more than just a funeral. It's a power struggle with massive consequences. Burial war, Lungu family versus South Africa. What happens on August 4th could change everything. Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu's body has become the center of a diplomatic and legal showdown between Zambia and South Africa. As the Lungu family pushes to bring the body home, South African courts are preparing to make a final ruling on August 4th, 2025. Will the family win the right to bury Lungu in Zambia, or has the late leader's death sparked a cross-border conflict that could reshape African politics? In this powerful documentary, we break down the legal battle in the Pretoria High Court, what the Lungu family is demanding, why the South African government is blocking the return, the emotional toll on Esther Lungu, what the August 4th ruling could mean for Zambia, international law, and presidential legacies. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to InspirAfrica Official for more breaking stories from Zambia and across the continent. Zambia versus South Africa. The dispute over the burial of Edgar Lungu, Zambia's 6th president, 2015 to 2021, who died on June 5, 2025, in Pretoria, South Africa, has escalated into a significant legal, diplomatic, and emotional conflict between the Zambian government and Lungu's family, with South Africa caught in the middle. This saga reflects a clash between state protocol and personal wishes, intensified by a long-standing political rivalry between Lungu and his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema. The issue has not only stirred domestic tensions in Zambia, but also raised questions about interstate relations in Southern Africa, particularly regarding sovereignty, institutional continuity, and the handling of former heads of state. The Zambian government insists on repatriating Lungu's body for a state funeral and burial at Embassy Park Presidential Burial Site in Lusaka, where all former Zambian presidents since independence in 1964 have been laid to rest. This stance is rooted in Zambian law and tradition, which view former presidents as national figures whose funerals are state responsibilities. Conversely, Lungu's family, led by his widow Esther Lungu and supported by his political party, the Patriotic Front (PF), demands a private burial in South Africa, citing Lungu's explicit instructions that Hichilema, his political rival, should not be involved in his funeral. The Pretoria High Court's intervention, halting a planned burial on June 25, 2025, has left Lungu's body in a Pretoria funeral parlor, with a critical hearing scheduled for August 4, 2025. This standoff is not merely a logistical or legal dispute, but a manifestation of deeper political divisions in Zambia, historical precedents across Africa, and the delicate balance of diplomacy in the region. It underscores the tension between individual rights and state authority, a recurring theme in post-colonial African governance. The death of Edgar Lungu, timeline and reactions. Timeline of events. Early 2025, Edgar Lungu travels to South Africa for specialized medical treatment for an undisclosed illness, reportedly related to complications from achalasia, a condition affecting his esophagus, for which he had surgery in 2015. By May 2025, his condition is reported as stable despite rumors of deteriorating health. June 3, 2025, Esther Lungu speaks to her husband for the last time before he is sedated for a ventilator. Lungu reiterates his wish that Hichilema should not be near his body or funeral, a sentiment he reportedly shared with researcher Dr. Sishiwa on May 18, 2025. June 5, 2025, Lungu dies at 6 a.m. at Mediclinic Medforum in Pretoria due to cardiac complications following surgery. His daughter, Tassila Lungu, announces his death via a Facebook video, invoking the national motto, One Zambia, One Nation, and noting his treatment with dignity and privacy. The Zambian government remains silent for hours, with President Hichilema issuing a condolence message 3 hours later, calling for unity. The government declares a 7-day national mourning period, while the PF announces its own mourning period and directs mourners to its headquarters, conflicting with the government's designated venue. June 11 to 16, 2025, negotiations between the Zambian government and Lungu's family falter. The PF holds a private memorial service at Pretoria's Sacred Heart Cathedral. The family initially agrees to a state funeral presided over by Hichilema on June 22, but on June 18 they halt repatriation, accusing the government of breaching terms by releasing a funeral program without consultation. June 20, 2025, the Lungu family announces that Lungu will be buried in South Africa, citing his wish for a private ceremony. The Zambian government ends the national mourning period, with Hichilema stating the country must resume normal life. June 25, 2025, hours before a planned burial in Johannesburg, the Zambian government secures a Pretoria High Court order halting the ceremony. The court rules that no burial will occur until a hearing on August 4, 2025, following an agreement between the parties. Mourners attend a mass at the Cathedral of Christ the King instead. July 29 to 30, 2025, the Lungu family seeks a cost order against the Zambian government for financial and emotional distress caused by the cancelled burial, arguing that Esther Lungu, as the surviving spouse, has the legal right under South African law to decide her husband's burial. The Zambian government requests access to Lungu's body for identification and authentication, citing public interest and conspiracy theories. Reactions. Zambian government. Hichilema's administration emphasizes Lungu's status as a national figure, insisting on a state funeral with military honors at Embassy Park. They cite legal precedent from the 2021 burial of Kenneth Kaunda, where national interest overrode family wishes. The government accuses the Lungu family of politicizing the mourning process. Lungu Family and Patriotic Front. The family, supported by the PF, accuses the government of disrespecting Lungu's wishes and politicizing his death. They claim Hichilema's involvement would mock Lungu's legacy, given their rivalry. PF acting President Given Lubinda calls the government's actions a political game. Zambian public. The standoff has caused confusion and grief, with mourners unsure how to honor Lungu. Civil society and religious leaders, including the Council of Churches in Zambia, urge dialogue to restore national dignity. Some Zambians express frustration, viewing the dispute as a distraction from pressing issues like economic challenges. Regional leaders. Southern African leaders, including Zimbabwe's Emmerson Mnangagwa and South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, attempt mediation but fail to resolve the impasse. Kenya's President William Ruto praises Lungu as a progressive leader. Media and analysts. The dispute is framed as a continuation of the Hichilema-Lungu feud, with analysts noting Lungu's mixed legacy of infrastructure development and economic mismanagement. Some see Zambia's insistence on repatriation as an assertion of state sovereignty, while others view the family's stance as a defense of personal autonomy. Why the body is still in South Africa. Lungu's body remains in a Pretoria funeral parlor due to a legal injunction obtained by the Zambian government on June 25, 2025, which halted a private burial planned by his family. The Pretoria High Court's order, issued hours before the ceremony, was based on an agreement between the parties to delay the burial until a final hearing on August 4, 2025. Several factors contribute to this situation. Political rivalry. Lungu's explicit instruction that Hichilema should not be involved in his funeral stems from their bitter rivalry. Hichilema's 2017 imprisonment for treason under Lungu's presidency and subsequent harassment allegations fueled the family's distrust. The family's refusal to allow Hichilema to preside over a state funeral led to their decision to bury Lungu in South Africa. Legal dispute. The Zambian government argues that Lungu, as a former president, is a national figure whose burial is governed by state protocol, citing the precedent of Kenneth Kaunda's 2021 burial. The family counters that South African law grants Esther Lungu, as the surviving spouse, authority over her husband's burial, and Zambian laws lack extraterritorial effect. Breakdown in negotiations. An initial agreement for a state funeral on June 22, 2025, collapsed when the family accused the government of altering the funeral program without consultation. This breach of trust prompted the family to opt for a South African burial, only to be stopped by the court order. South Africa's neutral stance. South Africa has avoided taking sides, with its government expressing respect for the family's wishes while acknowledging Zambia's claim. The Pretoria High Court's role is to adjudicate based on legal merits, not political considerations, leaving the body in limbo pending the August 4th verdict. Public interest and conspiracy theories. The Zambian government's recent request, July 29, 2025, to authenticate Lungu's body reflects concerns about public mistrust and conspiracy theories, further delaying resolution. The prolonged delay has turned a solemn matter into a public spectacle, with Lungu's body caught in a legal and diplomatic stalemate. The role of the Lungu family in the legal fight. The Lungu family, particularly Esther Lungu, daughter Tassila Lungu, and family spokesperson/lawyer Makibi Zulu, has been central to the legal battle to assert control over Edgar Lungu's funeral and burial. Their actions are driven by Lungu's explicit wishes, personal grievances, and legal arguments under South African law. Key aspects of their role include asserting Lungu's wishes. The family insists on honoring Lungu's instruction that Hichilema should not be involved in his funeral, citing his statements on June 3, 2025, and earlier discussions with Dr. Sishiwa Sishiwa. They argue that a state funeral presided over by Hichilema would betray Lungu's conscience. Legal representation. Makibi Zulu, a prominent Zambian lawyer, has been the family's voice, articulating their position in media statements and court submissions. He has argued that the Zambian government's claim to Lungu's body is legally unsustainable under South African law, as Esther Lungu holds the right to decide her husband's burial. The family also contends that Lungu's presidential benefits were revoked before his death, rendering him a private citizen. Financial and emotional claims. The family is seeking a cost order against the Zambian government for expenses incurred in planning the June 25th burial, including funeral home fees, venue hire, transport, clergy, and security. They argue that the government's last-minute injunction caused significant emotional and financial distress, particularly for Esther Lungu. Public statements. Tassila Lungu's emotional announcement of her father's death on June 5th set the tone for the family's stance, emphasizing unity while hinting at tensions. Esther Lungu's court testimony about Lungu's complaints of ill treatment by the Zambian government added a personal dimension to the legal fight, framing it as a defense of Lungu's dignity. Support from the Patriotic Front. The PF, led by acting President Given Lubinda, has aligned with the family, accusing accusing the government of politicizing Lungu's death. This support strengthens the family's position, but also escalates the political dimension of the dispute. The family's resolve to keep the burial in South Africa reflects their commitment to Lungu's legacy and their distrust of Hichilema's administration, but it has drawn criticism from some Zambians who view their actions as divisive. South Africa's legal argument. South Africa's role in this dispute is primarily as a neutral arbiter through its judicial system, with the Pretoria High Court tasked with resolving the conflict. However, the South African government has expressed a position that balances respect for the Lungu family's wishes with diplomatic considerations. Key elements of South Africa's legal and diplomatic stance include judicial neutrality. The Pretoria High Court's June 25, 2025 order halting Lungu's burial was based on an agreement between the Zambian government and the Lungu family to delay the ceremony until a full hearing on August 4. The court's role is to evaluate the legal merits of both sides, focusing on whether Zambian law can enforce repatriation in South Africa and whether Esther Lungu's rights as a surviving spouse take precedence. Family rights under South African law. South African law typically grants the surviving spouse or next of kin authority over a deceased person's burial. The Lungu family's lawyers argue that this principle supports their claim, as Esther Lungu has the right to decide her husband's burial location. The court must determine if this right overrides Zambia's claim to Lungu as a national figure. Diplomatic considerations. South Africa's government, led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, has emphasized respect for the Lungu family's wishes while acknowledging Zambia's interest in a state funeral. Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola's visit to Zambia on June 22, 2025 aimed to ease tensions, reflecting South Africa's desire to avoid setting a precedent that could complicate interstate relations. Hosting a foreign leader's burial without the home government's consent could strain ties with Zambia and other African nations. Precedent and sovereignty. South Africa is cautious about the broader implications of the case. Allowing Lungu's burial to proceed against Zambia's wishes could undermine the sovereignty of African states in managing their national figures' funerals, a sensitive issue given historical disputes over leaders like Angola's José Eduardo dos Santos and Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe. South Africa's legal argument is thus a balancing act, upholding its domestic laws while navigating diplomatic pressures and avoiding a precedent that could disrupt regional relations. The emotional toll on Esther Lungu. Esther Lungu, as the widow of Edgar Lungu, has been at the heart of this dispute, facing significant emotional strain. Her experiences reflect the personal cost of a public and politicized conflict. Grief amid public scrutiny. Esther Lungu's grief has been compounded by the public nature of the dispute. Her appearance at the June 25 Mass in Johannesburg, visibly upset after the court halted the burial, underscored the toll of the legal battle. The family's claim for compensation highlights the emotional distress caused by the disruption of funeral plans. Personal connection to Lungu's wishes. Esther's court testimony about her final conversation with Lungu on June 3, 2025 reveals her commitment to honoring his dying wish that Hichilema not be involved in his funeral. This stance, rooted in Lungu's perception of ill treatment by the Zambian government, has placed her in direct conflict with state authorities, intensifying her emotional burden. Legal and social pressure. Esther faces corruption charges in Zambia, which some see as politically motivated by Hichilema's administration. These charges, combined with the funeral dispute, have placed her under immense scrutiny, with critics accusing the family of using Lungu's death for political leverage. Supporters, however, view her as defending her husband's dignity against a vindictive government. Family leadership. As the surviving spouse, Esther has taken a leading role in the legal fight, supported by her daughter Tassila and lawyer Makibi Zulu. Her insistence on a South African burial reflects her determination to protect Lungu's legacy, but it has also drawn criticism from Zambians who believe the family is denying the nation a chance to mourn. The emotional toll on Esther Lungu is evident in her public appearances and legal submissions, which frame the dispute as a deeply personal mission to honor her husband's wishes amidst a politicized and contentious backdrop. What to expect on August 4? The verdict. The Pretoria High Court's hearing on August 4, 2025 will be a pivotal moment in resolving the dispute over Edgar Lungu's burial. Several outcomes are possible based on the legal arguments and broader context. Ruling in favor of the Zambian government. The court could grant Zambia's request to repatriate Lungu's body, citing the public interest and precedent from cases like Kenneth Konda's burial. This would likely mandate a state funeral in Lusaka, potentially with Hichilema presiding, though the family could appeal, further delaying the process. Ruling in favor of the Lungu family. The court could uphold Esther Lungu's right under South African law to determine her husband's burial, allowing a private ceremony in South Africa. This would affirm the family's autonomy, but could strain Zambia-South Africa relations and set a precedent for future disputes over deceased leaders. Compromise or mediation. The court might encourage a negotiated settlement, such as a state funeral in Zambia with limited involvement from Hichilema to respect Lungu's wishes. Mediation by regional leaders or Zambian church groups could facilitate this, though past failures suggest challenges. Further delays. If the court requires additional evidence, such as the Zambian government's requested authentication of Lungu's body, the case could be postponed, prolonging the uncertainty. The verdict will hinge on the court's interpretation of South African law versus Zambia's claim to extraterritorial authority, as well as the weight given to Lungu's status as a former president versus his family's rights. The outcome will have significant implications for Zambia's political climate and regional diplomacy. Zambia's next move: will they bring Lungu home? Zambia's strategy moving forward depends on the August 4th verdict and the government's broader objectives. Post-verdict actions: if the court rules for repatriation, Zambia will likely organize a state funeral at Embassy Park, emphasizing national unity and protocol. If the court sides with the family, Zambia may appeal or seek diplomatic pressure through regional bodies like the Southern African Development Community (SADC). Diplomatic engagement: Zambia has already engaged South Africa and other regional leaders to assert its position. Continued diplomacy, possibly involving SADC or the African Union, could pressure the family to comply with repatriation. Domestic political strategy: Hichilema's administration faces domestic criticism for its handling of the dispute, with some accusing it of vindictiveness. A successful repatriation could bolster Hichilema's image as a unifying leader, while failure risks further alienating PF supporters ahead of the 2026 elections. Public interest and transparency: the government's request to authenticate Lungu's body suggests an effort to address public skepticism and conspiracy theories. This move could be part of a broader strategy to restore trust and ensure closure for Zambians. Zambia's insistence on bringing Lungu home reflects a commitment to institutional continuity and national pride, but it must navigate the family's legal rights and the risk of escalating political tensions. Final thoughts and regional impact: the Edgar Lungu funeral dispute is a microcosm of broader challenges in African governance, balancing state authority with individual rights, managing political rivalries, and maintaining institutional continuity in post-colonial states. The saga highlights several key issues: political rivalries and reconciliation. The Hichilema-Lungu feud, marked by imprisonment, harassment allegations, and electoral battles, has prevented Zambia from achieving closure after Lungu's death. This underscores the need for mechanisms to foster reconciliation among political adversaries, a common challenge in African democracies. State sovereignty versus personal autonomy: the dispute raises questions about whether a former president's body belongs to the state or the family. Zambia's reliance on the Conde precedent suggests a trend toward prioritizing national interests, but the Lungu family's appeal to South African law challenges this norm. Regional diplomacy: South Africa's delicate position reflects the complexities of interstate relations in Africa. A misstep could set a precedent for future disputes, affecting how nations handle the deaths of leaders abroad. The involvement of SADC leaders indicates the issue's regional significance. Institutional continuity: Zambia's insistence on repatriation is framed as an assertion of state sovereignty and institutional resilience, critical for post-colonial nations building democratic frameworks. However, the public's frustration with the prolonged dispute suggests a need for clearer legal protocols for deceased leaders. Public sentiment: the confusion and division among Zambians highlight the emotional weight of the dispute. Many feel deprived of the chance to mourn a former president, while others view the family's stance as disrespectful to national tradition. The resolution of this case will shape Zambia's political landscape, influence Hichilema's leadership ahead of the 2026 elections, and set a precedent for how African nations handle similar disputes. It also serves as a reminder of the enduring impact of personal and political animosities, even in death.